Hello, heathens. I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the Witch's Wheel of the Year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. And hello, my witches, my pagans, my heathens, my freaks, my fanatics. If you know, you know. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me, your abundant host, Megan Angus, once again for our whatever it is that we're doing here, right? Stirring the cauldron, as we say, right? Gathering up the wool and wielding the distaff here on Spinning the Wheel podcast. We're talking about witchcraft. We're talking about paganism, past and present, talking about astrology, lunar process, and how we might utilize all of that stuff to ground ourselves in the things that we're experiencing in our lives, in the here and now, in the world at large. Um, we can work with this information and this history, this archaeology, like all the stuff that we're digging up, the astronomy and the astrology, as a means of, again, grounding ourselves and kind of understanding where we are, but as a way of also understanding who we are and what roles we might be playing in all of this stuff. And that stuff is going to come up for us this week. Um, you know, who are we in the midst of all of this, and what are we doing about that? And how did we get here? That stuff is what we are going to be focusing on in this week's episode, I guess, to an extent. Okay. The stuff we're in Lughnasadh season. I'm like, do I want to go through all the all the things? Check out my website, check out my Patreon. We are in the midst of Lughnasadh season. I will give the actual title here in just a second. If you are not familiar with Lughnasadh or Lughnasadh or Lammas, check out my 2-hour class on that Sabbat on YouTube. That is up live now on YouTube, as well as on this podcast platform. Wherever you're listening, at least the audio has been shared, if not also the video. And for folks that join my Patreon at the Venus level and higher, that's $9 a month and higher, you get access to the Lughnasadh folder that has the workbook for this Sabbat, the calendar for this year's Lughnasadh season, which has lunar dates, holy days from all over the world, past and present, etc., etc., digital spells, digital altars, and lots of other stuff. So, and those classes, when I was teaching them live and in person, and that may be coming back at some point, those were $30 a piece to come in, and you didn't get all of the stuff. You got the workbook and the calendar, but that was it. So this is a pretty good deal. Just saying, it's a pretty good deal. And massive thanks to my patrons, because you guys make it possible for me to be able to offer this stuff either for free or at a significantly reduced price. So thank you very much. If you love this podcast, if you are just absolutely overwhelmed with how totally fucking cool my podcast and videos and offerings are, please join my Patreon and support this work. Thank you to my patrons who have joined and support this work. I also offer tarot readings and natal chart readings that you can sign up for through my website or through Patreon with a discount code for personal guidance on how to work with all of this information. Because some weeks, if you've been around, some weeks it is a lot of information to swim through. So that said, let us get into it. This is Lughnasadh season, waning moon in Taurus, lunar week 19 by some lunar calendars. If you know, you know. Okay. So let's ground ourselves in our Lughnasadh work. What is the stuff that we are doing as pagans and witches and heathens, past and present, as well as lots of other folks around the planet? Our big themes for this Sabbath center around ideas like power, maturation, leadership, and production. And then that stuff breaks down into smaller bits like competition, examining our personal power and wielding it, um, thinking about performance and strength, but also thinking about the fruits of our labor, aka the consequences of our actions or the effects of our moves in the world, our results. Um, that's a lot of what this season is pulling us into focusing on. And then as we move into the latter stages of Lughnasadh season, there becomes a heavier emphasis on wisdom and sacrifice and taking the best of whatever the situation is or whatever the thing is that we have been working on, kind of pulling in the quote unquote cream of the crop, as they say. This is the time of year where we are focusing on that stuff as we work the wheel. So in these uh, in these ideas, um, there is this emphasis on, kind of understanding that you are a badass, but also wielding your badassery in the world. And we don't just arrive at being badasses. We all stand on the shoulders of people who were badasses before us. And those are our ancestors. Now, the word ancestor for me can mean a lot of different groups of people. It certainly can represent my genetic ancestry, so people that I am related to through genetics or blood, however you would like to think about that. Um, but I also consider the word ancestors to refer to any of the groups of people who helped make it possible for me to be where I am currently. So that can be chosen family, that can be cultural ancestors, that can be mythos ancestors. And if I want to get very esoteric with it, and hi, if we haven't met, I do. I'm going to be even thinking about my cellular ancestors. Like if we're talking about genetic ancestors, I'm not just going to stop with humans. I'm going to be pushing all the way back to the beginning of this planet, and thinking about all of the types of ancestors that I might have. Those single-celled organisms back there were rocking it out. They were making it happen. The field mouse that ran away from a volcano fast enough, that too is my ancestor. So in this season, it's really important for us to shine bright and be incredibly proud and be stoked on ourselves, be very excited about how cool we are and how much incredible stuff we can do. And at the same time, remembering the responsibility that we have to go be that incredible person and share those incredible gifts that we have, while at the same time remembering I didn't make this happen. I mean, I did, but I'm making it happen out of what was provided for me by previous groups of people. So that collection of ideas is a lot of what we're swimming around in, or burning up, if we're in the fire season, right? So whatever metaphor you want to work with, that kind of idea, or those kinds of ideas, that kind of imagery is what we are moving through during Lughnasadh season. So can that be Uplifting? Totally. Can we get a little high on that stuff? Yeah, absolutely. Can we get a little full of ourselves on that stuff? 100%. But also, when we talk about ancestry, we're talking about family, right? We're talking about the communities that have raised us, brought us up, protected us, educated us, provided for us, or not, right? And so, can there be some weird stuff that comes up? 100%. Can there be some baggage that's like, hi, I haven't been resolved yet? 100%. Um, and that we live in capitalism also is going to be something that is affecting our conversation around these ideas. When we talk about a word like production, right, that can get real spooky really fast because in the Western world and in within the realm of capitalism, what you can produce becomes your merit or your worth as a human. And so if you can't produce, then you aren't worth anything. And that is a terrible way to move through the world. That's a terrible way to be forced to commodify your entire existence and the things that you're interested in and the things you're curious about. If there's always this nagging voice in the back of your mind that's like, oh, I would love to get into crocheting, but how can I turn a profit off of it? Oh my God. Think of all of the things that humans have ever done. Think of everything that a human has ever created or invented or investigated or thought about. Think of every philosophical pondering, right, from every great sage in history. Think about if they had that pressure of, I'd better make this thought make me money. This thought has to pay my bills. How far behind would we be? Right? How little would we actually have? There is so much to human existence that has been produced from the joy of existing. There is so much of human existence that has been produced from the curiosity of existing. And so I leftist rant right off the gate, right? But in that, what I'm saying is, remember that, okay, and utilize that piece of information as a means of forgiving yourself when things feel frustrating or you're squished, right, by the pressures that the modern world are putting on you. Know that in some ways our ancestors didn't face that kind of stuff. They faced other challenges and they surmounted them, and that's why we're here. But it is not natural for us as a species to do this. Money is fake, right? It's all fake, right? And here's me starting off my podcast saying, join my Patreon because I also live in capitalism with you. But also, if I could do this stuff for free, I would. And as much of it as I can do for free, I do, just so that I can sleep at night. That's just for me. But cumulatively, this is the type of stuff that comes up for us in Lughnasadh season. So all at the same time, it's beautiful weather and the nights are long, the days are long and the nights are short, and it's warm and it's wonderful and everybody wants to go do everything, and there's festivals and there's bonfires at the beach and there's campouts and there's so much. But also, in the background, there is this tension and there is this pressure, and there is the past, however it is that we relate to that. And there is this tension and there is this pressure and there is this sense of, I have to produce, I have to show my results, I have to have something from my efforts. And so some years when we are hanging out in Lughnasadh season, all of that stuff feels really fantastic and we're surfing it and we're kind of riding high on it. And then other years, or maybe it's even all throughout all the Lughnasadhs, we get some of each. In other years we might feel like we are running to keep up with it, and that everything is a little overwhelming and it's a little overblown and it's a little too hot, a little too sticky, and so utilize your systems for cooling down, if you feel like your engine is running a little hot these days. Utilize your opportunities to safely and in a mature way go throw a fucking temper tantrum if you need to. We are big fans of laying on the floor and having a tantrum from time to time here on the podcast. We talk about it frequently. I feel like it is an entirely reasonable coping mechanism given our circumstances. So be kind to yourself, and also recognize that this is the season for riding high, running hot, pushing it out, being a little overblown, being a little excessive, being all the stuff. And at the same time, we're getting lots of opportunities to examine those things, dig through that stuff, look at our motivations, our biases, etc., etc., etc. Okay. So, I'm going to kind of dance back and forth this week between talking about the astrology and talking about our holy days because I want to, because that's what I feel like doing. And uh, so let us take a look at the holy days that we have this week. It's a really interesting collection of stuff. We are still moving through the giant festival complex that ancient Egyptians were observing around this time of year with the ancient cycle of the Nile overflowing its banks and the heliacal rising of the fixed star Sirius. Both of these events for ancient Egyptians marked the end of their old year and the beginning of their new year. And that moment in time has a massive festival complex connected to it, where there was multiple festivals happening in basically every single city and every single temple up and down the Nile. And so there were these great boat collection boat parades basically that were just going up and down the Nile over and over and over again, and attending all these different festivals day after day after day, saying goodbye to the old versions of gods and welcoming in the new versions of gods, and welcoming in the new year and welcoming in the new Ra or the new sun, etc., etc. So we still have lots of that stuff happening in the background throughout this week. We have feasts for Thoth, Hathor, Nekhbet, Nut, uh, Betedi, Harrow, which is a combination of Horus and Osiris, Hathor, which I already said, Menevis, Anubis. Who else has Sobek, Anuket, Nempti, Khnum, Ra, etc. Tefnut, Ha, Nephthys, Isis, etc. Right? Like everybody has big festivals all throughout this week. We've been talking about this big festival complex that happens at the end of the old year and the beginning of the new year for ancient Egyptians. There's lots of information online, but you can also listen to the last couple of weeks worth of podcasts to learn more about that. Not going to go into it too hardcore because it's all very much in the same themes of what we've already been talking about. There is something that is happening within that cycle that I will talk about a little bit later, though. So some of the other things that are happening for us around the planet, from our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have Tendong Lorum Fat, and this is a festival that begins with prayers, and it's ultimately dedicated to the high point of the flood season. So, in the midst of all of our Lughnasadh symbolism around power and maturity and all of that stuff, at the root of it is harvest. Lughnasadh is the first harvest out of 3 that happens. This is the grain harvest for pagans. We talk about this a lot in the class, and we see at the same time there are all these ablutions and prayers and offerings going out to forces of water, because of course, while this harvest is coming in, we want just the right amount of rain, not too little because the grains will die, as well as all of the other things that are still growing and yet to be harvested later in the year, right? Our corn and our squash and our potatoes and all of that other stuff that we might be planting, um, figuratively or literally, witches, okay? So even though Lunas, I know I'm pulling the car over for a moment here to get us oriented in our stuff again, but even though Lunasa is the first harvest, first implies that it's not the last, right? It's not the only harvest, it's the first. So there's also this sensation of like, oh man, we got a ways to go. Right? Like I'm already getting a little tired, I'm already a little blown out and exhausted, and we got miles to go before we sleep. Um, and so throughout Lunasa season, we have tons of festivals, past and present, praying to the rain gods and goddesses, praying to water deities and forces, the water deities that oversee rivers, that oversee the ocean. And we're saying over and over again, please don't stop providing us with water and fish, but also don't get crazy, please. Don't wash us out. Don't be so intense that the crops and the harvests are ruined, because of course grain crops are very susceptible to mold and mildew. And that has led to, witch trials and other moments in history where people have lost their damn minds because fungus and other interesting elements were growing on the grain that people were utilizing to make their bread and their other products. So, all at the same time, there is this please provide us enough, but not too much. So, from our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have this festival running from August 8th to August 10th, Tendong Lo Rum Fat, which is this, kind of a recognition of the 40-day deluge, which lots of different religions around the planet talk about, the Great Flood, and being saved from that, being high up enough from it to like receive the rains but not be flooded out, etc., etc. Interesting also because, as climate change kicks into high gear, we are seeing this cycle ramped up to really extreme levels for folks around the planet. And there are groups of people around the planet who haven't experienced these weather cycles who are starting to. So places that are traditionally dry in this time of year are now being hit with hurricanes and monsoons and these really crazy weather patterns because this stuff is kicking into overdrive. Okay. Um, so also from our Hindu friends and ancestors, we have Choti Jat Yatra. And this is basically a festival recognizing Nanda, who is the primordial cosmic energy which dispels the darkness of ignorance from her devotees. And she's connected to Kali. And this festival is connected to the Kali Puja, which will be coming up soon. Not yet. We've got a little ways off, but coming up soon. So there is this acknowledgement to um, the forces of darkness, the forces of chaos, the forces of lack of knowledge. That's an interesting thing. Put a pin in that. We're going to come back to this idea. From our ancient friends, or ancient Roman friends and ancestors, we have Vulcanalia, sacrifices to Maya, sacrifices to the nymphs, and the Dies Natalis for a temple dedicated to Ops Opifera, and the Hora or the Hore of Quirinus. So, Vulcanalia is a festival dedicated to the god Vulcan, but Vulcan, the volcano god, yes, as connected to Maya. Maya being, of course, sort of this embodiment of the concept of growth and abundance and the capacity to produce. Mayas literally means larger, greater. Maya Mayas or Maya Mayor means larger, greater. And so Vulcanalia was a festival dedicated to Vulcan, which is sort of like the fiery aspect of Maya. And it's interesting because Maya is connected to Bonadea. She's connected to Terra and Gaia and Ops and Juno and Karna and Magna Mater, the great goddess that we talk about, Kybele, at the beginning in spring, right? So this is like the hot, fiery, super hardcore, abundant version of the Earth Mother. But what I also think is very interesting is that in Roman mythology, the husband of Ops was Saturn. Yeah, right? Wait a minute, who? Now think about that classic depiction of Saturn with their giant sickle. Whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That becomes a very interesting image, right? Now, looking at the other deities that are being celebrated, like the Hore, these are literally the seasons themselves. The Hore were basically personifications of the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, the years, as well as the seasons. They were the personification of summer, winter, spring, fall. They were the personification of heat. They were the personification of wind. The really interesting connection of deities or entities or archetypes. And so there is this whole sense here of calling in the fiery, hardcore, abundant version of the Earth goddess. At the same time, sort of honoring that like everything happens in its season. When it's time, let it be time. Saturn, of course, aka Kronos, a deity of time, and a type of harvester, right? Carrying that great sickle. This whole collection of imagery for us is tapping into this deep idea of taking the best, this being the first of several sacrifices, and as we will discuss here in just a moment, um, this is also sort of a connection to um, our ancestry, right? Saturn certainly is an ancestor, certainly represents a lot of that elder energy, right? But moving to, where are you? Looking through my notes quickly, moving to August 10th through 17th from our Greek friends and ancestors, we have the Pan-Atheniana. This is the celebration of Athens, the celebration of Athena. It was the largest festival of the year, but it was also like the root of the uh, Olympics. So cool. Getting a little sidetracked here. That's connecting us to our competition and games stuff that we see a lot of emphasis with in Lughnasadh season, the Taltean funerary games that the Irish held for Lugh, which is where the holiday gets its name. But from our Roman friends and ancestors on this same day, August 10th, we have sacrifices for Luna and the opening of the Mundus Ceres, or Mundus Patet. And this happens multiple times through the years. The Mundus Cerera, Mundus Cerealis, it's pronounced or it's spelled a couple different ways, literally the world of Ceres, aka Kybele. Ceres is where we get the word cereal from. So this is the goddess of the grains. The Mundus Cerealis was a hemispherical pit or underground vault in Rome. Its location is uncertain. I'm sure the Vatican probably knows exactly where it is. Don't get me started. It was usually sealed by a stone lid known as the lapis manalis or manalis. And on 3 different days through the year, it was opened with the official announcement Mundus Patet, which means the Mundus is open. And offerings were made to agricultural or underworld deities, including Ceres as a goddess of the fruitful earth and the guardian of the underworld portals. Its opening offered the spirits of the dead temporary leave from the underworld to roam lawfully among the living. Basically, folks have described this as like a holiday for ghosts. The days when the mundus were open, very few occasions, and Romans were allowed, maybe even encouraged, to officially contact the collective spirits of the dead, who they called dimanes, Dimanes, dimanes. And the other two times of year that this is focused on are Parentalia and Lemuralia, and this is way out, like at the end of winter. We'll talk about those. We talked about them last year. We'll talk about them again next year. And both of these elements, giving offerings to the earth and then also giving offerings to the dead and allowing the dead to come up, seem to be uh, going back as far as anybody knows about this thing existing in the ground and this holiday around it, or these holidays around it. It was this from the start. So that's a really important image for us, right? um And something else that I think is really interesting about this is that historians believe that this was probably an actual grain storage point at some point, and that at another point in Rome's history, that it might have simply been a symbolic storage area. So now we're talking about literally just storing the power, right? Haha, right? Interesting stuff. Really, really potent stuff. Now, pushing even further into this, um, Roman tradition held that the Mundus had been dug and sealed by Romulus as a part of Rome's foundation. So, whatever it was that people thought this hole represented, whatever they thought was in it, being stored there, whatever it was, this is going back to the foundation of the city and the foundation of the city's concept of itself. Um, and so, uh, scooching through, um, I, as a side note, full transparency, I was going off. I apologize. My recording stopped and I didn't notice it. So I may repeat myself in hopes that I make my points because who takes notes? Not me. So ultimately, for me here, there is a really interesting combination between the symbolism of this very fiery, abundant version of this goddess Maya, right? Vulcanalia. Um, and her husband, Kronos, aka Saturn. Very important stuff. Uh, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I don't think I am. I think we've talked about, I think I said this. I think that makes sense. Call me and let me know. Send me an email if you're like, why did you jump from one to the other? So this Vulcanalia is also part of a big festival complex that we started off with a couple of weeks ago, where we have these, for ancient Romans, where we have this collection of festivals that witness the natural world as this wild, untamed thing. And then that is followed up with a collection of festivals that witnesses the natural world tamed or harnessed by human endeavor, and the stuff that we get out of that. So this is also included in that collection of stuff. So ultimately, we have this moment with this festival, just to wrap it up here a little bit with this particular festival, the opening of the Mundus Cereris, ancient Romans, um, where it's this pit in the ground that is a hemisphere, semicircle, that is both a place where this a great, powerful, abundant goddess is witnessed, and also a doorway or an opportunity for dead ancestors and the collected dead, the Demanes, to come up and hang out and party and chill. Um, this is tying directly back into this idea of our ancestry being a big part of the abundance that we might be able to cultivate or witness in our lives currently. These are, in my opinion, directly connected to each other. So were the Romans the only ones to be doing something? No. In this same week, from August 10th to the 18th, we have the Festival of the Good Death, aka Boa Morta, from our Candomblé friends and ancestors. This is our, ultimately a connection to Yoruba land festivals and traditions, Vodun, etc. Um, and also this week, we have from our ancient uh, Egyptian friends and ancestors a festival called Pacifying the Hearts of Those in the Horizon in the Front of Ra. And in ancient Egyptian literature, the phrase those in the horizon means the ancestors, and cool water and honey would have been offered to them. We also, on the same day, running from August 13th to August 16th, from our Buddhist and Japanese friends and ancestors, we have the festival of Bon or Obon, which is the custom of honoring the spirits of one's ancestors. This is a festival that has evolved into like it has a lot of family reunion vibes to it. Um, and people return to their ancestral family places. They will also go visit their family graves, and they clean them up and spruce them up and leave offerings there. Um, and so we have in the past and in the present, throughout this entire time period, this moment of simultaneously witnessing the heat and the intensity and the raging power of the sun. We're witnessing the intensity of weather systems around us. We're witnessing, for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, the massive abundance of the grain harvest as it comes to fruition, across the top half of the globe or the northern half of the globe. And simultaneously a recognition of the sacred dead, the ancestors underground in their underworld, right? Thinking back to the Mundus Patet and it being this semicircle or hemispherical cavern, chamber, whatever, it literally was meant to mimic the arching vault of the sky. And so overhead, you would have the vault of the sky, and underfoot, you have the, sort of not arching, but descending, right? The scoop of the underworld, right? The roundness of the underworld. And it immediately, for me, brings to mind this image of our ancestors literally, from our point of view, walking upside down on the other side of the ground, right? That the ground itself is actually just this thin slice, and we walk on one side of it and they're walking on the other side of it, almost like upright and reverse tarot cards. I don't know, that it's just like such a stark image in my mind. Um and so this entire week, throughout, all at the same time, we have these really beautiful festivals running from the, basically covering the last 5-ish thousand years, maybe further back than that, given the age of some of these festivals. Now, sitting with all of this stuff, one of the things that I think is super duper dope is one of the little festivals, little, probably huge, that ancient ancestors were also celebrating this week was a feast for Bawi. And Bawi is a Egyptian deity that is literally, their name means two souls, and it is a reference to Horus and Set synchronized into a single god with two heads. Fucking what? Like, but pardon my French, but what? I mean, that's literally right. Like, Horus is the rising dawn, the new era, the youth, the bright intellect, and Set is Saturn. It is Kronos. Set is literally the deity that marks the end of what is known and represents the chaotic unknown darkness beyond. Think about all of our symbolism that we talked about in class and in last week's podcast around the Irish god Crom Dubh, or Crom Cruach, the dark crooked one, the power that is bent, the light that is going dark, right? His name has all of these different definitions for, the one who is going under, the one who is darkening, the one who is being undone, the god falling. So this week for me is just this really intense, difficult, and beautiful collection of festivals, past and present, all recognizing that we are in many ways the product of the past. And as much as we might like to think of ourselves as this bright and shining brand new thing that no one's ever seen before, no one's ever heard of before, yes, that's true, right? Nobody's ever done it the way I do it. And they'll never do it again the way I do it, right? I am a singular moment. So are you. So are we all. That's our Leo moment of being in the spotlight on the stage. No one's ever going to star like I star, but we're all stars, right? There's the opposition from Aquarius. Like, what are you talking about? Astrology, baby. And that's the struggle, that's the tension, that's the work, that's the power that we are utilizing in Lughnasadh season. And here we are really in the midst of a lot of that stuff. Now, take a breath, because that was a lot, right? Okay, well, here's a little bit more. Remember I said put a pin in it towards the beginning of the podcast when we were talking about, what was I talking about? Something. I was talking about something. The embodiment of wisdom, the embodiment of knowledge. Also this week, leading up to our new moon that we're going to have at the beginning of next week, just before that on August 15th, we have from our Gnostic friends and ancestors the Assumption of Sophia. And from our Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Assumption of Mary Theotokos. And Sophia is the embodiment of wisdom and enlightenment. Mary Theotokos literally means the mind of God, the knowledge of God. Horus also is the embodiment of the knowledge of how to do the stuff here on Earth. Thoth, who also has a festival this week, is the embodiment of knowledge itself and thinking itself. Thought, the word thought comes from the Egyptian word thoth, probably. And so again, running from very, very back far into the distance, right up until present day, we have these festivals that are sitting within this complex of symbolisms of maturation, right? Maturity is the utilization of the wisdom that we gain from our lived experiences, the highs, the lows, the challenges, the failures, the triumphs that we experience here on the physical plane. The wisdom is derived from like a vinegar, like a balsamic vinegar, right? Wisdom is the ultimate distillation of the stuff that we have seen, what we've experienced, our mistakes, our perfections, our goods, our bads, our all of it, and everybody that came before us too. So this entire week is really sitting within this symbolism of, look at the abundance of the earth, look at what we have produced. We were capable of producing this through the facilitation of all of the gifts of the previous generations. Let's in fact invite some of those folks back for a big old party and a moment to celebrate. And at the same time, let us witness the light and the dark all at the same time, the overworld and the underworld, the moment of brilliance and the fall from that thing, the descent from the peak. Just that's what we're working with this week. Now I hope it makes sense now why I wanted to jump directly into the festivals. I was like, I don't want to interrupt myself with all of this stuff. So to complement this, and I know I'm kind of jumping around a bit throughout the week, but I hope it's all making sense for you. To complement this, we have the heliacal risings of two fixed stars. We have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Merak on August 11th, approximately, and then the heliacal rising of the fixed star Ras El Assad on approximately August 13th. And approximately because it really does change depending on where you are on the globe, not just your latitude, but your longitude and your altitude. So, you know, it can vary by weeks. So we are in the season of these fixed stars rising. And Merak is found in the constellation Ursa Major, aka the Great Bear. Um, and for Hindus, this is one of the seven rishis. The seven rishis are the seven stars that make up what we call the Big Dipper. And holy moly, if you would like to go down if this hasn't been enough of a wild ride for you so far, go look up just the Wikipedia page on the Big Dipper and look at the mythology connected to it. First off, literally every civilization on the planet has been like, hey, those seven stars, look at that, and then have made up stories about it. And a lot of those stories are very similar. A lot of them are very similar. Uh, and one of the names for this collection of stars, we call it the Big Dipper, but it's called the Sacred Plow or the Wagon, both of which are very appropriate for folks in the Northern Hemisphere who are doing harvest work right now. Um, but there is a sense here in this star, there is a general energy of power. There is a general energy around abundance, right? We need a wagon to carry everything. There's so much of it. But there is also something very important about this star because Merrick is utilized for navigation, and it is used with the star Doob to find the pole star. And so there is also something about being very clear on our trajectory, being very clear on what are we trying to aim for, what are we trying to head for, what are our goals and why, where are we headed and why are we trying to get there. There's a real emphasis on that element too. And so if you feel like you are wandering a little bit from your path, this is a really great time for asking for some guidance. Again, the ancestors are here. Whether you want them or not, they are hanging out this week. So, side note, maybe put out a glass of fresh water and a little honey or bread or, grandpa's favorite beer with, and favorite pack of smokes, or what have you, right? And ask for a little guidance from beyond. This is a really important thing. And then when we're looking at the fixed star Ras El Assad, this is found in the constellation Leo, and it's in the Leo's head. And so again, there is something about power, regalness, right? Leadership. We know that these are deep themes in our Lughnasadh work. But am I pointing in the right direction? Where am I headed? Right? We always can work with the metaphor. So where am I headed? And am I on what's the path I'm on? How do I feel about that? How does everybody else feel about that? Right? And all of the stuff that comes up with hanging out with our ancestors and all of the stuff that comes up with, how did we get here? Now, it's not just all about America, but some of our astrology is influenced by what's happening with Pluto in the sky. And Pluto is at 28, is in retrograde right now, spends half the year in retrograde, NBD. But it's at 28 degrees currently. Just got there a few days ago. And it's going to be at 28 degrees for a while, and then it's going to scooch back to 27 again. And 27 degrees is where Pluto is in the chart of the United States. So I think you see where I'm going with that. Like, where are we and how did we get here? And whose ancestors are we standing on as we reap the supposed rewards? Right? There's a lot of ways that we can work with this imagery. There's a lot of stuff that could be coming up for us. So, again, be kind to yourself, drink some water, take a nap, do some deep breathing. This is not all your work to do. You have your part, and that's all you can do. You are totally responsible for your part and kind of can't be held responsible for the stuff that's not your part. But you can encourage others. You can encourage others to be responsible for their part. But it could be this kind of week. Okay. So we've talked a lot about we've talked a lot about our holy days. Are there more holy days? Yes, there are. There's a lot. We have from our not so ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, Wafa el Nil, which is the sacred overflowing of the Nile, the flooding of the Nile. This doesn't happen anymore because of the Aswan Dam, but this is still a big moment of celebration for modern Egyptians. Big party, big festival. It's a cultural festival. It's just a celebration of Egypt and Egyptianness. And they've offered a bit to the world. So, have at it, kids. We also, from our Nigerian friends and ancestors, have a festival from August 15th to the 20th dedicated to Osun Osogbo. Osun or Oshun is the goddess Oshun. And this festival is held towards the rainy season, usually in the last weeks of August or the middle of August. It's a traditional festival from our Yoruba friends and ancestors, honoring the river goddess Oshun. We talk about her a bit in the Lughnasadh class. And we have other stuff, but check the calendar. And if you have questions about it, come and hit me up because we just don't have time to talk about it all. So this is a heavy week, right? It's the highs are high and the lows are low, as I've been saying to my friends lately. This week also witnesses the bombing of the U.S. bombing Hiroshima. We talked about that last week. And this week, it witnesses the U.S. bombing Nagasaki. So here again is a place where we're talking about ancestors and what shoulders are we standing on as we reap the rewards, quote unquote, of now. And that bright, hot power, right? And the underworld. I don't have to make it up. It's right there. It's just right there. Okay, now that we have talked about that stuff, I'm going to come back to the astrology of this week. Let's get into this stuff. Tuesday, August 8th, 3:28 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Later in the day, for everybody else around the planet, we have officially our waning half moon in Taurus at 15 degrees. It is conjunct Jupiter at 14 degrees. And 15 degrees Taurus is the halfway marker. That is where we would mark solar Beltane. So this is an important point in the sky. And for the waning half moon, what are we doing, right? Let's break this down. The waning half is where the fruit withers, what needs to change in spite of or because of our successes or our failures. Well, hello. Let's, right? Here's a week where we're reaping the effects of our actions, past and present. Not just our actions, but the cumulative efforts of all the generations and all the efforts that have come before me. And here is a moment, right, where we're kind of looking at what the results are of that stuff. And so this this waning half moon is providing us with a little bit of friction. And it's like, yeah, what's not working here? We've got that fixed star that's like, what is our trajectory? What are we navigating? Where are we headed? Both of those fixed stars. Where are we headed with all of this stuff? What's the trajectory that we are on? And so this waning half moon in Taurus is like, and we're not discussing this from an existential place. We're talking about the physical world results of this stuff. what needs to change before we head into the next lunar cycle, the next process, the next go around the wheel, the next whatever. What isn't working? What might seem successful but actually could be a hell of a lot healthier and more holistic for everybody involved. With this waning half moon specifically in Taurus, there's a big conversation around where are you putting your energy and who is benefiting from that. Look at the strikes that are happening around the country and around the world. Are you putting your energy and your money literally into sacred places? This is a week where, not a lot of us, I know some of us have actual land that we can work. We have an actual garden plot that we go and plant stuff in. But many of us live in the city, me included. And the most I can do is grow plants in my house and maybe on my windowsill, but I don't have a space to do that. So I am often working with the metaphor of the times. And how our planting and reaping and rewarding and crops often looks like working for another person and getting a paycheck. But what are you doing with that money? Um, and I realize we live in capitalism, so it's very difficult to make ethical decisions in capitalism. I'm in the process right now of uh diving through, renters insurance and that whole miasma. And of course, I pull up a page to do research on these various companies and I go to Open Secret and I'm like, who's donating money to who? Because if I'm giving you my money, I want to know who you're giving that money to. And it's all bad. It's all bad news. It was various degrees of bad. It was my choices. It was like either crappy, really crappy, or kind of fucking awful. Like, so which would you prefer? And and that, right, that stuff, does that mean that I'm not going to do it? I have to do it. So how do I do it in a way that I can at least sleep at night? How can I do it in a way that makes some level of sense to me? This is a really great week to just take an accounting, not a flogging, okay, because we just talked about it. Again, it's difficult to make those ethical decisions. What did we talk about at the very beginning of the podcast? The deep pressure that every single moment and thought and action in your entire life is somehow supposed to produce some fiscal result. That is wild and terrible. Not only is it like super bizarre, but it's also gross. It's yucky. It's not good. And yet here we are, right? In this moment, we don't have a lot of options. So how do we move through this? And what are the incremental changes? What is the advice that we can ask from our ancestors in the past? How do I deal with this? How do I move through this in the most ethical way possible? And how do we course correct? What's the 1 degree adjustment that I could make today that might not make a difference in my lifetime, but might make it better for somebody past me? Because eventually, we are the ones in the underworld. Eventually, we are the ancestors. Eventually, we are the shoulders that other folks will be standing on. It doesn't matter if you have kids or not. That has nothing to do with that. We are somebody's sacred ancestor. We are the holy ancestors of the future. And what was the incremental adjustment that we were able to make, that we chose to make, that maybe made it better for somebody later on? That's a lot of what this waning moon in Taurus wants us to think about. And can we do it in joy? Can we do it with any modicum of pleasure? Can we do it with any bit of, opulence and fecundity and deliciousness? Because Venus is the ruling planet of Taurus, of course, retrograde right now. So thinking about all this stuff, reviewing all this stuff, right? We're in it. We're in it, witches. We are in it this week. We are in it. I want to say this too before I get into the lunar stuff around the lunar info. Um, Even though some of this astrology is very uplifting that we're going to talk about this week, The overall result for everybody currently has been cranky, cranky, cranky. Lots of people are feeling very fussy. Lots of people are having a hard time. So, if your favorite astrologer is like, this transit is awesome, and you're like, but I hate it, it's fine. It's okay. As we said at the beginning of the podcast, tantrums fully endorsed on this. Just do it in the right way. You go to your safe space, right? You go to your house or your bestie's house, you announce, I need to have a tantrum, right? Everybody goes, okay, right? They get out of your way or whatever, and then you have your tantrum. You shit your pants on your own floor, right? That's how we in 2023 approach dealing with this madness that we are being offered from our neighbors and the gods. Okay. For our lunar body work with a waning moon in Taurus, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, or otherwise restoring the ears, mouth, teeth, throat, neck, and shoulders. Those are the parts of the body ruled by Taurus. As I say every week, not a doctor of the human corpus. I am a doctor of time and space, my friends. So check with your trusted health advisor if you want to integrate any of that information. And for our plant body work, we are planting for hardiness. We are planting roots, leafy crops. We are grafting, budding, taking cuttings, doing fertilizing, cultivating. We're cutting trees for lumber and firewood. We are pruning trees. This is a great week for pest and disease control. And then planting trees, perennials, biennials, as well as plowing, harvesting, um, specifically below ground crops to eat, dry, and store. So, other than our moon on Tuesday, the 8th, we have no astrology, but you might start to feel the astrology of the next day. So let's get directly into that. Wednesday, August the 9th, we have Venus in retrograde in Leo, squaring Uranus in Taurus at 22 degrees, and we have Mercury in Virgo trining Jupiter in Taurus at 14 degrees. So it is a Taurus-tastic week at the beginning of the lunar week, with the moon in Taurus and then Jupiter and Uranus both getting lit up in Taurus. So let's take a second. The transit between Mercury and Jupiter, very nice. Big plans, big picture. It's a very expansive mindset. It might feel very lifting. There might be a lot of optimism and like very open-minded attitudes in your thinking and your conversations with other people. You might find that the trolls on in the internet take a day off, and like folks tend to have a little bit more uplifting of an attitude in general. The combination between Mercury in Virgo and Jupiter in Taurus brings something that's both like pragmatic and sort of sensual or grounded. Like it's practical, but at the same time, it's like we still can have it be lush and abundant and delicious in real time, like here in Meat Space. And how does that like fit into our bigger picture thing? So, as a side, think about all that navigation stuff that we talked about with the holy days. This is a very nice transit that is adding to that energy or supporting that energy of what's the big picture, what are my big plans, and how hopeful and expansive and optimistic can I be about all of that stuff? Especially when we're starting the week off with our waning half moon in Taurus saying, hey, there's some stuff that needs adjusting before I go into the next thing. So, very, very supportive transit. Also on the same day, though, we have Venus squaring Uranus. Now, this energy is all over the board, typical for a Uranus transit, right? Uranus, my loving name for Uranus is the zodiacal table flipper, right? The chaos high kick of the zodiac. And so Venus Uranus transits literally are all over the board. They can be really delightful for bringing in some kinky fun, bringing in the we've never tried that before, that type of energy in your sex life or romantic life or your creativity life. If you are like, man, I need to jog out of these old ways of thinking and these old ways of moving, and I don't like these old habits. I want something new, something unexpected, something out of left field. Bring me the curveballs. Fantastic for that energy. If we are seeking stability, which is what Venus likes, generally speaking, if we're seeking the routine, if we are seeking the predictable, no, no, ma'am. I'm sorry. That's not what we have today. That is not on the menu. And so, from one angle, this can be really invigorating, right? It could be revolutionary. It could be this really like, woo, we've never tried that before. That was so exciting. I'm like revived by that. Woohoo. And on another side of it, it could feel like, whoa, this is very confusing. This seems like, chaos for the sake of chaos. What are we doing? I feel destabilized. What's happening? I don't know if I like this. So just, take it as it comes. Be aware that parts of that transit might feel really fun and new and exciting, and some of that stuff might feel upsetting and like weird and destabilizing. And so just try to take care of yourself and roll with it a little bit. Okay. Then on that day, also our moon moves into Gemini. Thursday, August 10th, we have no astrology of note, but we do have an interesting astronomical moment that Mercury is at its greatest eastern elongation, aka it is as far east from the sun as it's going to get in its cycle, in its orbit around the sun. And so it is, for those of us here in the Northern Hemisphere, a beautiful evening star in the west. After the sun sets, look for Mercury in the west. There's tons of websites online and star finder, planet finder apps and all that stuff. Utilize that science. Enjoy it. But just look for that. And so given that we've got this very potent Mercury transit, it might be really nice to go out and literally look at the planet and be like, hey, homie, and have a little chat. Why not, right? Let's do it. Our ancestors were doing it, and they figured out some cool stuff. Probably wouldn't hurt. Friday, August 11th, we've got nothing going on except that the moon enters Cancer. And so I will say that anytime the moon is in Cancer, it is super potent. The moon rules the sign of Cancer, and the moon being sort of our celestial object that oversees a lot of our magical practices, whatever phase it happens to be in. Anytime the moon is in Cancer, our magic, whatever it is that we're doing, will get a bit of a boost. Our moon is waning. And so that brings us to Saturday, August 12th. 12:27 a.m., we have our balsamic moon in Cancer at 4 degrees, trine Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 4 degrees. So remember when I was mentioning the balsamic stuff earlier? I hope that made it in. Because I was really, and if it did, cool, I'm repeating myself. If it didn't, then I'm glad I remembered to say this. A lot of what I am looking at our symbolism with our holy days, the lens I'm looking at it through is this idea of distillation, this idea of condensing all of this stuff down into, what are the results? What are the efforts of all these people that have come before me? What are the efforts of all of the phases of my life before this one? If we don't believe in reincarnation and, ancestry, the ancestral dead, like, nope, everything just stops when we die. Okay, that's cool. We can still work with the metaphor. What is the accumulation of my life so far? And what are the results of that? What is the accretion? And our balsamic moon brings us to that place. What is the accumulated distillation of everything that's happened in this last lunar cycle or this last whatever portion of time you would like to work with? Now, moreover, this moon is in Cancer. So yes, our magic is boosted and all that stuff, but what is Cancer? Cancer is memory, it's nostalgia, it's family. Woof, right? Like even in the most positive way, this is still heavy stuff. And if you don't have positive relations with your family, it could be extra heavy. So just again, as I've said several times in the podcast, be gentle with yourself for this week, be kind with yourself, take it easy, don't overpromise, don't overcommit. Like you might, and if the astrology is hitting lovely for you, enjoy it. Ride that shit, man. Surf that. Enjoy it. Go be impressive. Go be amazing. Go hit all of the social circles and the festivals and the bonfires at the beach safely, of course. Um, but uh, but but also witness that there could be some heavy energy for you, even in the best of circumstances. Okay. So we've got this balsamic moon in Cancer. What are we doing with a balsamic moon? Again, as I just said, we're distilling everything that's happened to us in this last process and, really starting to think about where we're going to go in the future. But our balsamic moon in Cancer is like where I'm going in the future is really, really based in the past. So what have I written in my notes? The past, memories and reminiscing. What are we holding on to justify the present? Where do we romanticize the past? But from Raven Caldera's Moon Phase Astrology, the recommendations are watch some old movies, listen to some old music, get into that old media. And when you start to reminisce about the past, make sure that there's somebody else in the room that was there, and compare how you remember things to how they remember things. What's the stuff that you've held on to from the past? What's the stuff that your bestie has held on to from the past? You might call up some old friends that you went to high school or college with. I know, but maybe, right? Or like old friends from your old neighborhood or old friends from an old job and reconnect. It's not that you're necessarily going to end up best friends afterwards. You might be like reassured as to why those people aren't in your life anymore. And or it might be really cool to connect with people who were there when it happened, right? And who remember the stuff that you remember. I tend to hang out with people of all different ages, folks that are significantly younger than me, my same age, and folks that are older than me. And there's times when I'm talking about, my wild adventures, I'll see on the faces of millennials around me, folks that are in their 20s, late 20s, their 30s, or even early 40s, who are like, girl, you didn't get up to all that crap. And then I talk to my friends who are my age, late 40s, 50, early 50s, who are like, she got up to that and more. And then folks that are even older than me that were like, that's all you did? Like, well, when I was a kid, right? So that type of perspective could be really, really powerful and potent for you to work with this week as we move into that balsamic moon. Um, For our lunar body work, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, or otherwise restoring the breasts, the chest, the belly, the lungs. This is all the parts of the body ruled by Cancer. And for our plant body work, we are planting anything and planting for abundance, especially our viney crops, corns, peas, beans, tomatoes, watermelon, cucumber, zucchini. This is a great time for fertilizing again, as well as cultivating, cutting trees for lumber and firewood, pruning our trees, pest and disease control, planting roots, trees, perennials, and biennials, plowing, harvesting below ground crops to eat, dry, and store, as well as watering our plants if you haven't for a while. Maybe they need some, it's been pretty hot, and checking on your irrigation situation. The astrology on this day might seem daunting, but I think it's actually helpful given everything that we're talking about. We have the sun in Leo trine Chiron retrograde in Aries at 19 degrees. Now, Chiron represents our sacred wound, our personal pain, the pain that we have experienced through the stuff that we've experienced in our life. It also, and so you're like, well, that's not fun. Why am I excited about that? Because it also represents the wisdom that we glean or could glean from those experiences. And when it's a trine from the sun, yes, it feels like a spotlight has been put on this circumstance or this information, this stuff, but it's a warm golden honey spotlight. It's like a, hey, I feel okay enough to talk about this, or let's have a moment where we look at these things that hurt, that were painful, but what good could I turn out from that, right? This is a moment of spinning flax into gold, and we are in a season of harvesting plenty of flax. So there is, again, a real beautiful harmony here to having this transit happen at this time of year. It doesn't every year for us, it just is for now. Um, where we have a real assist from the celestial entities that are like, hey, I know it's a lot of crap, but crap is also fertilizer, right? So, and that's how you grow good stuff. Planting the dead back into the ground makes for rich soil. So, what's up? and and this is a day where we can have that kind of hopeful, optimistic, expansive. I know those are words that we normally save for Sagittarius or for Jupiter, but this is a day where we could look at the painful experiences that we've had with a more loving eye, a more merciful eye, but also an eye of like, hey, this is where I could actually really help myself with this information or even heal somebody else, which is pretty holy work to get up to, and a pretty cool harvest from a difficult plant, right? Sunday, August 13th, we then have the Sun conjunct Venus in retrograde in Leo at 20 degrees. So, lots of different opinions about Sun conjunct Venus retrograde, or we could say Venus retrograde conjunct the Sun, whatever. This is the Kazemi moment of the Venus retrograde. This is the moment where Venus goes into the underworld and can't be seen because it's lost in the brilliance of the sun. So we've got lots of spooky myths. Um, uh, we've got lots of spooky stuff that comes up for us when Venus is in its retrograde cycle. Underworld journeys, can be fun or really harrowing and totally awful. Your mileage may vary, right? We've had a lot of discussions about underworld stuff. So, again, very interesting timing. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Very interesting timing that Venus is also stepping into a type of underworld journey. The Venus retrograde pattern is deeply connected by some historians' translations to the descent of Inanna. We talk about we, as in modern pagans, often refer to and talk about the descent of Inanna every single year during Samhain season as a descriptor for that, because we see that connection to Aphrodite's story, right? Core, Persephone, like all of those characters, and that whole journey that they go through. Were our ancient ancestors celebrating this every single year, or were they doing it every 18 months with Venus's retrograde, or were they doing it every 8 years when Venus retrograded in a particular sign? We don't know. We're still trying to piece that stuff together. TLDR, the Sun conjunct Venus can be another transit that could play out in a couple of different ways for you. It could feel like a restart. It could feel like a really amazing moment for beauty and love and reconnection. Um, it could feel, it could be very, very chill. Um, it could also be an underworld journey. It could be a really great day for you to reflect on all the stuff that might be coming up for you this week with all of these holy days and the other transits and the lunar work that's there to be done. So it's on a weekend, it's a Sunday. I know some of us work on Sundays, some of us don't. But whatever time you have to chill, and use that as an opportunity to reflect and to think about the stuff that came up for you, even if, and maybe especially if, you haven't been able to resolve any of this stuff. You know what I mean? Some of this stuff is it's issues that we don't ever resolve. We find a way to live with the uncomfortable parts, and we move forward and continue to do our thing. But that's what's up with our magic sometimes, is it's not about fixing things. It's not about, eradicating all of the bad. It's actually about finding a way to live with it in a way that is as healthy and productive as possible. So that brings us to Monday, August 14th, and our astrology here is Venus in retrograde in Leo, trining Chiron retrograde in Aries at 19 degrees. Okay, look. Look, people, listen. Listen. Um, what can I say about this? Ultimately, I think that these days are giving us uh an excellent collection of transits to, in the most loving and helpful and healthy and held way, to look at some stuff that's really, really painful, that's uncomfortable, that's everywhere from just heavy, maybe beautiful but heavy, all the way to like really gross and yucky, and it's all needs to be dealt with in some way or another. Resolved, as we just said, maybe not, probably not, maybe not, but wrangled with, considered, thought about, and what 1 degree can we adjust our navigation to find the next thing, right? To aim ourselves in the direction that we really want to be aiming in. Also, I will say this: Monday, August 14th, our moon enters Leo. And so we will officially be in the pre-funk for the Leo new moon. And as much as you can have downtime, I recommend Monday and Tuesday into the new moon on Tuesday. Um, leave it alone. Maybe not so much stuff. Maybe not so much um action, lay off on the magic, all of that stuff, right? When we're in that dark of the moon, it's really a time for us to be still and not worry about the past, and also not worry about the future just yet. It'll be here eventually. So there's that. Wrapping up the week, Tuesday, August 15th. Sun in Leo, square Uranus in Taurus, 23 degrees. Okay, great. After all of that, we come back to the chaos wizard that is Uranus squaring the sun, or the sun squaring Uranus. So again, with a Uranus transit, it's wacky. What kind of a thing is it? It's a square. Could be difficult, could be super weird, could be super exciting. Hooray. So again, when we've got a transit from Uranus, there's an opportunity for us to mix it up and to try something new and to shake up the energy. And like, if stuff is feeling stuck, it's going to get unstuck on a day like this. But Uranus is very progressive and forward minded, and is not thinking about the present. When we are having Uranian transits, it's an opportunity for physical accidents in the real world. And I don't like to be super prescriptive like that with astrology, but this is one of the things when we're having Mars Uranus transits, or Uranus transits in general. Watch out, slow down in traffic, take your time, make sure your shoes are tied, watch your step. Just take a beat before you head off into the thing. Make sure you got all your stuff, all that. Okay. That aside, this could be a day of stuff coming out of left field. Curveballs, sports, metaphors. I don't know why, but here we are. Sudden changes. And how that affects you is how you can roll with the unexpected, and how you can roll with surprises. Is this super upsetting and like, oh crap, my thing has been destabilized? Oh no, this isn't the habit that I've been working to form. What the heck? Right? Could be super frustrating. Or, oh my gosh, I'm so stuck in a rut. I wish something could come along and jog me out of it. Bam! Oh wow, this is all brand new. I've never seen it. So again, it's how you feel about change, and how helpful change, sudden change, could be for you on a day like this. Okay. That is our astrology for the week. So let me go into the rest of the stuff here, which is our tarot card for this week, the Sun. But I think that it would be equally appropriate to work with either the Five of Wands or the Six of Wands again. I know I said Six of Wands last week, but we have so many funerary games and funerary moments and ancestral moments here. The Six of Wands makes a lot of sense here for reasons that I don't have time to go into, because we have a lot of that Uranian energy, which can kind of play out in so many different ways. Like, yes, no, maybe, hot, cold, woo, right? Like all in the span of 5 minutes. The Five of Wands makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of action. Nobody knows what's going on. Is it good? Is it bad? Nobody can tell. But we also have a lot of solar transits this week. And we have a lot of emphasis on solar energy in a lot of our holy days throughout this week. And so the Sun card makes a lot of sense too. The Sun card is a card that represents our capacity to shine brilliantly, not even despite the horrible things and the tough things that have happened to us, but maybe even because of the wild things that we've experienced and lived through. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Um, don't do drugs, kids. But if you do the good ones. So any of these cards make sense for us with the energies that we are working with in this week. It's wacky, it's turntable, it's dredging up some heavy stuff for us. And on some days we might be crying with laughter, and on other days we might be crying with sorrow or frustration. And it just might be one of those weeks. Also, let me say, I know we're in the midst of tarot, but I'm bouncing back to the astrology for just a second because, hi, it's me, it's my podcast, and it's Uranian, so sudden changes. Uranian energy can really feel tense, and it can feel very anxious, and it can feel very like keyed up and wired, like in intensity. So if you're into like taking care of your nervous system, if that's a thing you do, you might need to do a little extra of that this week, whatever that stuff is for you. Some deep breathing, your calming exercises, your ramping down exercises, all of that stuff. So the Sun card, again, is what, the Five of Wands and the Six of Wands kind of depicts that tension and that like radical energy, shooting in all directions kind of vibe. The Sun is like energy shoots in all directions. It's cool, man. We've got this. I know how to ride this vibration or this frequency towards success or fulfillment or happiness or whatever. For our witchcraft this week, making corn dollies, but really our ancestral work that comes up for us during this time period is very, very loudly coming to the front and saying, hey, pay attention, pick me, pick me. Sacred competition also might be really important this week for us, and sacred play, very, very important for us. And our journal prompts for this week, I don't really have any for you. I think that it's going to be formulated out of how you experience the holy days, the material of the holy days that are here for us, and how you experience these moons, the Taurus moon and the Cancer moon, what comes up for you in memories, that type of stuff. Maybe this is a week for no journaling, but we're doing art. This is a week potentially for pulling out old pieces of artwork that you haven't finished and continuing to work on them and displaying them. I might also recommend that this is a week of perhaps even pulling out recipes from your ancestors and trying to cook some of that food, and thinking about where they were when they were eating that food and what was going on for them in their lives. And that kind of stuff. That's what I recommend versus sitting down and writing about things so much this week, as like living out the magic and living out the astrology for ourselves and living out the lunar process and living the Sabbath, really living the witchcraft. Okay, my pagans, my heathens, my witches. I know it's a lot, and we got this. It's cool. Again, I want you to remember that our ancestors did this before us, and we are the shoulders that people are going to be standing on in the future when they're facing their version of these troubles and wild experiences. And this is our time to shine. Um, as I said in the notes on Patreon, you might be feeling tarnished right now. Do not forget you are made of gold. Blessed be.